You want to let him steal your work on purpose? She asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Precisely, I replied, a mischievous glint in my eyes. But this time he'll be signing his own resignation letter along with it. She chuckled, her initial skepticism giving way to a grudging admiration. All right, Sienna, you've got my attention. Let's see what we can do. The proposal was a masterpiece. Months I poured into that thing, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the faint scent of desperation emanating from the perpetually stressed-out inhabitants of the Titan Corp offices. Market research, financial projections, competitor analysis. I'd practically spliced my DNA with that document. It was sleek, innovative, and guaranteed to catapult Titan Corp to the next level of market domination. Or so I thought. Richard, my esteemed boss, and by esteemed, I mean egotistical, credit-stealing weasel, had been suspiciously hands-off during the entire process. The occasional, how's it coming, Sienna? And the obligatory, keep up the good work, were the extent of his involvement, which, in hindsight, should have been a red flag the size of a billboard. But I, naive and ever-optimistic Sienna, blinded by the promise of a promotion and the misguided belief that hard work was always rewarded, plowed ahead. I envisioned myself presenting the proposal to the board, basking in the glow of their admiration, my career trajectory shooting skyward like a rocket fueled by ambition and caffeine. The day of the presentation arrived, and I, armed with my meticulously crafted proposal and a power suit that screamed, "Take me seriously," marched into Richard's office, ready for my moment of glory. "Richard," I announced, my voice brimming with barely contained excitement, "the proposal is complete. It's innovative, it's comprehensive, it's—" He cut me off with a dismissive wave of his hand, his eyes glued to his phone, his attention clearly elsewhere. Yeah, Sienna, just leave it on my desk. I'll take a look at it later." "But the board meeting is in an hour," I stammered, my confusion growing. "I thought I was supposed to present it." He finally looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "You? Present it? Don't be ridiculous, Sienna. This is a high-stakes presentation. It needs someone with experience." My stomach clenched. This wasn't right. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. "But I created the proposal," I protested, my voice rising in panic. "The research, the analysis, the—" He cut me off again, his voice hardening. "Look, Sienna, you're a good worker, but you're not ready for this level of responsibility. Just be a good girl and leave the proposal. I'll handle it." The sheer audacity, the unadulterated, egotistical audacity of it all. He was going to steal my work, present it as his own, and reap the rewards of my months of tireless effort. And then, just to add insult to injury, he fired me. "While I'm at it, Sienna," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "I think it's time we parted ways. Your performance has been subpar lately, and we need someone who can keep up." I was speechless, dumbfounded. My mind reeled, trying to process the injustice, the betrayal, the sheer absurdity of the situation. "But the proposal," I stammered, my voice cracking. "It's no longer your concern, Sienna," he said, his smile widening. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a presentation to prepare." I left his office, my head spinning, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and despair. He had stolen my work, my future, my very identity as a competent, capable employee. And as I walked out of the Titan Corp, building for the last time, my box of personal belongings clutched tightly in my hand, I vowed that I would not let him get away with it. I would fight back, I would expose his lies, and I would reclaim what was rightfully mine. Little did I know that fate had other plans, plans that would give me a second chance, a chance to rewrite the script, a chance to not only reclaim my work, but to take everything from the man who had so carelessly stolen it. The smell of stale coffee and the faint hum of the office air conditioning were the first things that registered. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lights, the familiar cubicle walls closing in on me like a beige prison. Wait, I thought, my mind struggling to catch up. What? I was fired. Richard? The proposal? And then it hit me. The theft, The betrayal, the humiliation of being discarded like a used napkin, the years that followed, the struggle to find another job, the whispers behind my back, the career that had been derailed before it even began. Okay, so I got screwed, I got fired, and then I woke up. Here, 2 years ago? Yeah, fate has a twisted sense of humor, but I'm rolling with it. I checked the date on my computer screen. 2 years, 2 whole years before Richard Vaughn had systematically dismantled my career and stolen my future. 2 years before the betrayal that had sent my life spiraling into a pit of unemployment and despair. A wave of disbelief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. This was my chance, my opportunity to rewrite the script, to turn the tables on the man who had so carelessly destroyed my dreams. But this time, I wouldn't fight him head on. No, that would be too easy, too predictable. This time, I would play the long game, a game of subtle manipulation, strategic maneuvering, and carefully calculated revenge. I would let him steal my work again. I would let him bask in the glory of my ideas, my creativity, my sheer brilliance. I would let him climb the corporate ladder, his ascent fueled by my stolen achievements. And then, when he was at the peak of his success, when his ego was inflated to the size of a blimp, when he thought he had won, I would strike. I would expose his lies, reveal his treachery, and watch as his carefully constructed empire crumbled around him. I would take everything from him: his job, his reputation, his power, and I would do it with a smile on my face and a carefully crafted thank you on my lips. The game was on, and this time I was playing to win. Richard Vaughn had no idea what was coming. He had underestimated me, dismissed me, discarded me. But he had also inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, a second chance. And I wasn't about to waste it. The original proposal was safely tucked away on my personal hard drive, a digital insurance policy against Richard's thieving tendencies. Now it was time to create a new version, one that was subtly different, a Trojan horse designed to infiltrate the enemy camp and unleash chaos from within. This time, Richard stealing my work is part of the plan, the legally binding ironclad plan. Let's just say I've added a few surprises. I spent the next few weeks meticulously crafting the new proposal, my fingers flying across the keyboard, my mind a whirlwind of strategic calculations. The core ideas remained the same, the brilliance of my original work still shining through, but this time I embedded hidden clauses, subtle legal landmines that would explode in Richard's face when the time was right. I consulted with a lawyer, a friend of a friend who specialized in intellectual property law. She was initially skeptical, her eyebrows raised in amusement as I explained my plan. "You want to let him steal your work? On purpose?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "Precisely," I replied, a mischievous glint in my eyes. "But this time, he'll be signing his own resignation letter along with it." She chuckled, her initial skepticism giving way to a grudging admiration. "All right, Sienna, you've got my attention. Let's see what we can do." We worked late into the night, carefully crafting the legal language, embedding it seamlessly within the proposal's technical jargon. It was a masterpiece of deception, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a Trojan horse waiting to be unleashed. The final product was a work of art, a testament to my intelligence and my determination to outsmart Richard at his own game. The proposal was still brilliant, still innovative, still guaranteed to impress the board. But this time, it was laced with invisible threads, legal tripwires that would bring Richard's carefully constructed empire crashing down around him. And as I saved the document, a smug smile spread across my face. Richard Vaughn, the master manipulator, the corporate shark, had no idea what was coming. He thought he was stealing my work, but in reality, he was signing his own downfall. The game was on, and this time, I was holding all the cards. The bait was set, the trap laid, and all that remained was to lure the prey. I strolled into Richard's office, the new proposal tucked casually under my arm, my expression a carefully crafted blend of innocence and eagerness. "Richard," I announced, my voice bright and cheerful, "I've been working on a new proposal. I think you'll be impressed." He looked up from his computer screen, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "A new proposal, but I thought—" I know, I interrupted, my voice laced with a hint of self-deprecation. You told me to focus on other tasks, but I couldn't help myself. I had this idea, and I just had to see it through. I laid the proposal on his desk, my fingers lingering on the cover page, a subtle reminder of my ownership. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the title, his expression shifting from suspicion to intrigue. "This is interesting," he remarked, his voice betraying a hint of excitement. "I thought so," I replied, my smile widening. "It's innovative, it's comprehensive, well, it's everything the board is looking for." He nodded, his eyes glued to the document, his mind already calculating the potential benefits, the accolades he would receive, the power he would consolidate. "This could be huge, Sienna," he said, his voice now laced with a barely contained enthusiasm. "Huge!" "I know," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "It's a game changer." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like gratitude crossing his face. "Thank you, Sienna," he said, his voice surprisingly sincere. This is exactly what we need." "You're welcome, Richard," I replied, my smile widening. "Just doing my job." I turned to leave, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and amusement. Watching him snatch up the proposal, his eyes gleaming with avarice, was almost too easy, like watching a toddler grab a shiny toy, oblivious to the dangers lurking within. He's so predictable. It's almost boring, almost. I walked out of his office, my steps light, my heart filled with a sense of triumph. The bait had been taken, the trap sprung. Richard Vaughn, the master manipulator, had fallen for my carefully crafted deception, his greed and ambition blinding him to the consequences of his actions. The game was on, and I was in control. Adrian Blackwell, CEO of Phoenix Corp, Titan's main competitor, a man whose reputation preceded him, ruthless, ambitious, and brilliant. He was a shark in a tailored suit, and I was about to become his most valuable asset. Our first meeting was at a nondescript cafe, far from the prying eyes of the corporate world. He arrived precisely on time, his presence commanding attention even in the dimly lit corner booth. "Miss Hayes," he greeted me, his voice a smooth baritone that hinted at both power and danger. "I've heard interesting things about you." "Adrian Blackwell? Yeah, he's a shark, but he's my shark now. And Titan Corp? Well, they're about to learn what it feels like to be chum." I smiled, my eyes meeting his with a confidence that belied my nervousness. "I hope they're good things, Mr. Blackwell." "Call me Adrian," he said, his lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And yes, they are quite good. You have a certain reputation, Miss Hayes, a reputation for intelligence, for ambition, and for a certain ruthlessness that I find quite intriguing." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I'm a woman of many talents, Adrian. Talents that I believe could be beneficial to your company." He raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. "Oh?" "Titan Corp is vulnerable," I continued, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "They're overextended, their resources stretched thin, their leadership compromised." I paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Adrian's eyes narrowed, his gaze intense, his mind already calculating the possibilities. "And what makes you think I'd be interested in exploiting their weaknesses?" he asked, his voice a challenge. "Because," I replied, my smile widening, "I can give you the keys to the kingdom. I can tell you where the bodies are buried, where the cracks are hidden, where the vulnerabilities lie. I can give you Titan Corp on a silver platter." He leaned back, his eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. "And what do you want in return, Miss Hayes?" "A seat at the table," I said, my voice firm. "A chance to build something new, something better. A chance to prove that I'm more than just a pawn in someone else's game." He studied me for a moment, his gaze penetrating, his silence a test of my resolve. And then he smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached his eyes and sent a shiver down my spine. "Welcome aboard, Sienna," he said, extending his hand. "Let's make some waves." The partnership was formed, the alliance forged. Adrian Blackwell, the shark, had found his new navigator, his guide through the treacherous waters of corporate warfare. And I, Sienna Hayes, the woman who had been underestimated, dismissed, and discarded, was about to become the architect of Titan Corp's downfall. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation. Richard, oblivious to the impending doom, stood at the head of the table, his smug grin radiating confidence. He cleared his throat, his eyes sweeping over the assembled executives, his voice dripping with self-importance. "Gentlemen, esteemed colleagues," he began, "I'm thrilled to present to you a groundbreaking proposal, a project that will revolutionize our company and solidify our position as industry leaders." He paused, savoring the moment, his gaze lingering on the chairman of the board, a man whose approval Richard craved above all else. "This proposal," he continued, his voice rising with enthusiasm, "is the culmination of months of tireless effort, of meticulous research, of—" He faltered, his eyes widening in surprise as the chairman interrupted him, a frown creasing his brow. "Richard," the chairman said, his voice sharp, "before you proceed, I believe there's a matter we need to address." Richard's smile faltered, his confidence wavering. "A matter, sir?" "Yes," the chairman continued, his gaze fixed on a document in his hand. "According to this legal documentation, the intellectual property rights to this proposal belong to Sienna Hayes." The room erupted in murmurs, the executives exchanging surprised glances, their attention shifting from Richard to me, the silent observer seated at the far end of the table. Richard's face paled, his carefully constructed composure crumbling like a poorly built sandcastle. "Sienna?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. But, "It seems there's been a misunderstanding, Richard," the chairman interjected, his voice laced with a hint of amusement. "Perhaps you'd like Miss Hayes to clarify the situation?" All eyes turned to me, the spotlight suddenly shifting, the power dynamic tilting in my favor. I rose from my seat, my smile serene, my voice calm and collected. "Gentlemen," I began, my gaze sweeping over the stunned faces, "I believe there's been a slight oversight. This proposal, the one Mr. Vaughn is attempting to present as his own, is in fact mine." I paused, letting the words sink in, savoring the look of panic on Richard's face, the disbelief in the eyes of the board members. "I developed this proposal," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "I conducted the research, I analyzed the data, I crafted the strategy, and I did it all while Mr. Vaughn was busy. Well, I'm not quite sure what Mr. Vaughn was busy doing." I let the implication hang in the air, the silence punctuated by the rustling of papers and the occasional cough. Richard, his face now a mask of desperation, tried to interrupt, to offer an explanation, a denial, anything to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The board had seen through his lies, his deception exposed, his credibility shattered. The chairman, his expression a mixture of amusement and disgust, silenced Richard with a wave of his hand. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice firm, "we'd be very interested in hearing your presentation." I smiled, my moment of triumph finally arriving. I walked to the head of the table, my heels clicking on the marble floor, my every step a deliberate assertion of power, a reclamation of what was rightfully mine. Richard, defeated and humiliated, was forced to watch as I presented my proposal, my voice confident, my knowledge undeniable, my vision clear. The board members, initially skeptical, were soon captivated, their questions insightful, their approval evident. And as I finished my presentation, the room erupting in applause, I couldn't help but glance at Richard, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of envy and regret. The game was on, and I was winning. The news hit the financial world like a tsunami. Phoenix Corp, once considered the underdog in the industry, had suddenly landed a series of major deals, snatching clients from under Titan Corp's nose with ruthless efficiency. Rumors swirled about insider information, leaked strategies, and a mysterious informant who seemed to know Titan's every move. Titan Corp's stock plummeting, their reputation tarnished, Richard's panic priceless. I watched the chaos unfold from my strategically placed cubicle, a smug smile playing on my lips. The information I'd fed Adrian, the carefully chosen leaks about Titan's vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, their internal struggles. It was all coming to fruition. The carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction playing out exactly as planned. The office was a whirlwind of panicked whispers, frantic phone calls, and emergency meetings. Richard, his face pale, his eyes shadowed with fear, was a constant fixture in the boardroom, his voice hoarse from shouting, his composure cracking under the pressure. "Who is it?" he'd roar, his voice echoing through the thin walls. "Who's leaking this information? Find the mole! Find them now!" His desperate pleas fell on deaf ears. The mole was sitting quietly at her desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard, her expression a mask of innocent diligence. No one suspected the quiet, unassuming Sienna Hayes, the woman who had been dismissed, discarded, and forgotten. The fallout was spectacular. Titan Corp's stock plummeted. Their investors panicked. Their clients questioned their reliability. The once mighty giant was teetering on the brink, its reputation tarnished, its future uncertain. Richard, meanwhile, was drowning. His carefully constructed empire, built on a foundation of lies and stolen achievements, was crumbling around him. The board members, once eager to sing his praises, now glared at him with suspicion, their questions sharp, their demands for answers relentless. "Vaughn," the chairman boomed, his voice laced with barely contained fury. "Explain yourself. How could this happen? Who is responsible for this disaster?" Richard stammered, his excuses weak, his denials unconvincing. He looked around the room, his eyes searching for a scapegoat, someone to blame for his own failures, but all he found were accusing stares, disappointed frowns, and a growing sense of distrust. The tables had turned, the power dynamic shifted. I was no longer the victim, the pawn, the forgotten employee. I was the puppet master, the architect of his downfall, the woman who was about to take everything from him. The boardroom was thick with tension, the air heavy with the scent of fear and desperation. Richard, his face pale, his eyes darting nervously, stood before the executives, his voice a strained whisper. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice cracking, "I understand your concerns. The recent setbacks have been unfortunate." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the grim faces, his mind racing, searching for a solution, a way to deflect the blame, to salvage his sinking career. "But I assure you," he continued, his voice gaining a hint of false confidence, "we have a plan to not only recover from this crisis, but to emerge stronger, more resilient, more—" He faltered, his eyes falling on me, the silent observer seated at the far end of the table. A spark of inspiration ignited in his desperate mind, a cunning plan to shift the blame, to create a scapegoat, to save himself from the impending doom. "I believe," he announced, his voice regaining its strength, "that the solution lies in promoting Miss Sienna Hayes to the position of senior project manager." The room erupted in murmurs, the executives exchanging surprised glances, their eyebrows raised in disbelief. Richard, ignoring their skepticism, pressed on, his voice now laced with a carefully crafted enthusiasm. "Miss Hayes," he continued, his gaze fixed on me, "has demonstrated exceptional skills, a keen understanding of the market, and a remarkable ability to anticipate challenges." He paused, his lips curving into a condescending smile. "I believe she is the ideal candidate to lead us out of this crisis, to restore our reputation, to secure our future." The silence that followed was deafening. The board members, their faces etched with suspicion, looked at me, their eyes questioning, their silence a challenge. I met their gaze, my expression carefully neutral, my mind racing, calculating the potential benefits of this unexpected turn of events. Richard, the cunning manipulator, had inadvertently handed me the perfect opportunity, a chance to infiltrate the inner circle, to gain access to the levers of power, to accelerate my plan for revenge. He actually thinks I'm going to be his puppet. Bless his heart. He's so clueless, it's almost endearing. Almost. I rose from my seat, my smile serene, my voice calm and collected. "Gentlemen," I began, "I appreciate your confidence in my abilities. I assure you, I will not disappoint you." Richard beamed, his relief palpable, his eyes gleaming with a gratitude that was as misplaced as it was pathetic. He had no idea that I was the architect of his downfall, the puppet master pulling the strings, the woman who was about to take everything from him. Richard Vaughn, blinded by his own desperation, had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. The boardroom buzzed with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. Richard, his relief palpable, beamed at me, his eyes filled with a gratitude that was as misplaced as it was pathetic. He really thought he'd outsmarted me, that I'd be his pawn, his shield against the consequences of his own actions. Bless his heart. "Miss Hayes," the chairman announced, his voice formal, "we've reviewed your qualifications and we're impressed with your initiative, especially your last proposal. It has been the only recent positive development in this office. We're prepared to offer you the position of senior project manager, effective immediately." I allowed a small smile to play on my lips, my eyes twinkling with a secret knowledge that sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. "Thank you, gentlemen," I replied, my voice steady, my expression carefully neutral. "I accept." Richard's smile widened, his hand reaching out to shake mine. "Congratulations, Sienna," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "I have no doubt you'll excel in this role." "Thank you, Richard," I replied, my grip firm, my eyes meeting his with a hint of challenge. "I intend to." The meeting adjourned, the executives filing out of the room, their whispers a mix of curiosity and speculation. Richard, his confidence seemingly restored, clapped me on the shoulder, his voice booming with feigned enthusiasm. "This is a great opportunity for you, Sienna," he said, his eyes gleaming with a self-satisfaction that made my stomach churn. "You've got a bright future ahead of you." "I believe I do, Richard," I replied, my smile widening, the irony of his words not lost on me. "A very bright future indeed." As I watched him stride out of the boardroom, his shoulders squared, his head held high, I couldn't help but feel a surge of anticipation. The game was entering its final stage, the pieces moving into place, the climax approaching with a delicious inevitability. Taking his job was going to be the cherry on top, the sweet, sweet cherry of corporate revenge. I returned to my cubicle, my mind racing, my fingers itching to set my plan in motion. The promotion was the key, the final piece of the puzzle. Now I had the access, the authority, the power to dismantle Richard's empire from within. And as I opened the file containing the evidence I had meticulously gathered, the documentation of his lies, his thefts, his betrayals, a cold smile spread across my face. Richard Vaughn, the man who had stolen my work, my future, my very identity, was about to learn the true meaning of the word regret. The boardroom was packed, the atmosphere tense. Richard, oblivious to the impending doom, sat at the head of the table, his smug grin a testament to his arrogance. He had no idea that the ground beneath his feet was about to crumble, that the woman he had underestimated, the woman he had used and discarded, was about to deliver the final blow. I stood before them, my posture straight, my voice steady, my eyes fixed on Richard's. "Gentlemen," I began, "I've called this meeting to address a matter of grave importance, a matter that affects the very foundation of this company." Richard's smile faltered, a flicker of unease crossing his face. "What's this about, Sienna?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "It's about integrity, Richard," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "About honesty. About the ethical standards that should guide our every decision." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, the silence amplifying the tension in the room. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting nervously, his confidence waning. "For years," I continued, my voice rising with controlled anger, "this company has been led by a man who has built his career on lies, on deceit, on the systematic theft of other people's work." The room erupted in gasps, the board members exchanging shocked glances, their attention riveted on me, their disbelief palpable. Richard, his face now pale, his eyes wide with panic, tried to interrupt, to deny, to deflect. "This is outrageous!" he sputtered, his voice cracking. "Sienna, you're out of line. This is slander." "Slander?" I echoed, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "I have proof, Richard. Irrefutable proof of your fraudulent activities, your plagiarism, your betrayal of this company and its employees. I laid the documents on the table, the evidence I had meticulously gathered over the past months. Emails, reports, financial records, all pointing to Richard's systematic theft of my work, his manipulation of data, his fraudulent claims of success. The board members, their initial disbelief giving way to outrage, devoured the information, their faces hardening with each damning detail. Richard, his carefully constructed facade crumbling around him, sank back in his chair, his eyes filled with a terror that was both satisfying and disturbing. The look on his face when I exposed him, pure, unadulterated terror. It was glorious. I continued, my voice now a weapon, sharp and precise, cutting through his denials, his excuses, his pathetic attempts to salvage his reputation. I detailed his theft of my original proposal, his manipulation of the board, his exploitation of his employees, his relentless pursuit of power at any cost. The room was silent, the only sound the rustling of papers and Richard's shallow breaths. He was defeated, his career in ruins, his reputation shattered, his power stripped away. And as I finished my exposé, the board members rising to their feet, their voices a chorus of condemnation, I couldn't help but feel a surge of triumph. The game was over, and I had won. Richard Vaughn, the man who had stolen my work, my future, my very identity, was now the one being exposed, humiliated, and discarded. Justice, it seemed, had a way of catching up, even in the cutthroat world of corporate politics. And as I watched Richard being escorted out of the boardroom, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped, I couldn't help but smile. The sweet, sweet taste of revenge was a dish best served cold, and in this case, it was served with a side of public humiliation. The hallway was silent, the air thick with the residue of Richard's downfall. He walked slowly, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped, the weight of his disgrace pressing down on him like a physical burden. His office door stood ajar, a symbolic representation of the life he had just lost, the career he had destroyed with his own hands. I followed him, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness, my presence a silent reminder of his defeat. He reached his office, his hand trembling as he fumbled for his keys, his eyes avoiding mine, his shame palpable. "Richard," I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper, but with a clarity that cut through the silence. He turned, his face pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. "What do you want?" he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Just a few parting words," I replied, my smile serene, my eyes gleaming with a satisfaction that I made no effort to conceal. He braced himself, his shoulders tensing, his jaw clenching. He knew what was coming, the final blow, the verbal coup de grace that would solidify his humiliation. "Next time," I said, my voice steady, my words deliberate, "do your own work." I delivered the line perfectly, with a smile, the same condescending smile he had given me when he fired me, the smile that had fueled my determination to rise above his betrayal. The blood drained from his face, his eyes widening with a mixture of shock and humiliation. The words, the tone, the mirroring of his own cruel dismissal. It was a blow to his ego, a public dismantling of his carefully constructed facade. He opened his mouth to speak, to retort, to offer a pathetic defense, but no words came out. He was defeated, broken, his spirit crushed under the weight of his own misdeeds. And then I watched him walk away, jobless, disgraced, done. He disappeared down the hallway, his footsteps fading into the silence, his presence erased from the company he had once ruled. I stood there for a moment, savoring the victory, the culmination of months of planning, of calculated revenge, of unwavering determination. The game was over, and I had won. Richard Vaughn, the man who had stolen my work, my future, my very identity, was now nothing more than a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered in the corridors of Titan Corp. And as I turned to leave, my head held high, my steps confident, I couldn't help but feel a surge of liberation. The past was finally behind me, the future stretched before me, filled with possibilities, opportunities, and the promise of a success that was truly my own. Adrian's office was a study in contrasts, sleek modern furniture against a backdrop of antique maps, cutting-edge technology humming alongside shelves stacked with leather-bound classics. He was a man who straddled the line between tradition and innovation, a duality that was reflected in both his personality and his business strategies. He greeted me with a warm smile, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of admiration and respect. "Sienna," he said, gesturing towards a plush armchair, "please have a seat." I settled into the chair, my posture straight, my eyes meeting his with a confidence that had been forged in the fires of adversity. "Adrian," I replied, my voice steady, "thank you for seeing me." "It's my pleasure," he said, his voice smooth, his gaze unwavering. "I've been following your progress with great interest. You've orchestrated a masterful takedown of Richard Vaughn and exposed the rot within Titan Corp. Impressive." "Thank you," I said, a hint of pride in my voice. "It was satisfying." He chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated through the room. "I can imagine, but I didn't bring you here to simply congratulate you. I have a proposition for you, Sienna." He paused, his eyes searching mine, gauging my reaction. I leaned forward, my curiosity piqued. "I'm listening?" "I want you to join Phoenix Corp," he said, his voice firm, his gaze unwavering. "Not as an employee, but as a partner. I want you by my side, Sienna, helping me build something extraordinary." Adrian's offer was tempting. A partnership? A chance to build something even bigger, even better? Yeah, I'm in. My mind raced, processing the implications of his offer. A partnership with Adrian Blackwell, the CEO of Phoenix Corp, the man who had recognized my potential, who had trusted me, who had given me the platform to execute my revenge. It was an opportunity that was too good to refuse, a chance to not only solidify my position in the industry, but to shape the future, to create something that was truly mine. "Adrian," I said, my voice filled with a newfound determination, "I accept your offer. Let's build an empire." He smiled, a genuine smile this time, one that reached his eyes and ignited a spark of excitement within me. "Excellent," he said, extending his hand. "Together, Sienna, we'll make history." I shook his hand, our grip firm, our eyes locked in a silent agreement. The game had changed, the stakes raised, the possibilities endless. I was no longer just a player. I was a force to be reckoned with, a partner in a venture that promised to reshape the industry, to redefine success, to create a legacy that would be remembered for generations to come. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city skyline. I stood on the rooftop of my apartment building, the cool breeze brushing against my face, the world stretching out before me, a canvas of possibilities. It was a bittersweet moment, a farewell to the past, a celebration of the future. I had left Titan Corp, not just a job, but a chapter of my life, a chapter filled with pain, betrayal, and the crushing weight of expectations. But I had also left behind the woman I used to be, the insecure, timid girl who had been defined by others. I had emerged from the ashes of my humiliation, stronger, more confident, more determined. I had built a new life, a life on my terms, a life where I was the architect of my own destiny. I had partnered with Adrian, a man who saw me for who I was, who supported me, who challenged me, who loved me for me. And now, as I stood on the rooftop, the city lights twinkling below me, I knew that I was ready for the next chapter, a chapter that was filled with promise, with adventure, with the excitement of a future that was truly mine. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with a sense of liberation. I had walked away from Titan Corp, not just from a job, but from a life that was no longer meant for me. I had walked away from Richard Vaughn, the man who had tried to break me, who had underestimated me, who had underestimated the power of a woman who was determined to rise above the ashes of her own humiliation. I had walked away from the past, from the pain, the betrayal, the shattered dreams, and I had walked into the future, a future that was filled with possibilities, with love, with a sense of purpose that I had never known before. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in a golden glow. I took one last look at the skyline, a silent farewell to the past, a silent embrace of the future. And then, with a smile on my face, I turned and walked back inside, ready to start the next chapter of my life, a chapter that was all about me, my dreams, and my destiny.